Okay.
I think your internet is weak.
Oh, it is?
I keep losing you.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm not speaking into the mic. Now you hear me better now?
No. You keep hanging. I think check your Wi-Fi connection.
Okay,
Is it good?
Seems good. It's connected, secured.
Okay.
Watch it. Okay.
Okay.
Be'ez Hashem, today's daf is daf Nun Vav, and we are beginning daf. Here we go. We're beginning Amar Shmuel, about 12, 14 lines from the bottom. Interestingly enough, the Gemara is discussing over here. We learned that in order to be chayiv, you need to do for relations with the arayas. We learned that you don't have to have a full intercourse, a full bia. Even hara'ah, even something called hara'ah, an initial intercourse, that already you could be chayiv for illicit relations. And also that hara'ah is also enough to be kaina yavam. That's what we learned in our Mishnah. So now the Gemara is going to describe what is called initial intercourse. Amar Shmuel said, hara'ah, initial intercourse. Again, if you just do this, you chayiv kares. What is that? Zu nishika. Nishika means you touch the male organ with the female organ. And he says like this, just a touch, you didn't even penetrate. Because he says, Mashal, let's give you an example. La'adam shemiach etzba'oi al piv, a man puts his finger on his mouth. If you put your finger in your mouth, somehow you're going to penetrate a little bit into your mouth. So if just by the man touching the organ with his organ, the woman's organ, there's going to be a slight penetration, that's called hara'ah. And even hara'ah, that's chayev and arayas. So that's Shmuel's opinion. That's one opinion. Ki also Rabba Babachana Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Babachana came from Eretz Yisrael, and he said over in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar Bia b'shivcha charufa. In shivcha charufa is a dedicated maid. You're not allowed to have relations with a dedicated maid that's supposed to be that's married to an eved ivri. And if someone has relations, he's chayiv a carbon lav. He's chayiv a lav. So there, the Torah says that you only chayiv if you complete an intercourse. Okay. You hear me? Yeah.
No, it stopped for a second and then it came back. I don't know why.
All right.
Maybe I should get out and go back in again.
No, maybe I'll have to reset it after. I think it's good now. So anyway, Rabbi Babachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar Bia b'shivcha charufa zu achnasas atara. A Gemar Bia means a complete intercourse is called hachnasas atara. When the corona enters in, penetrates. Just the corona enough is called the completion of a bia. That's what Rabbi Babachana said. So he's not talking about hara, he's talking about the end of the bia. Masav Rav Sheshes, Shichva Zera, we learned in the Braisa, Rav Sheshes asked, it means that Shivcha Rufa has to have a complete release of semen. Ein chayiv elal bias hamerik, until you totally empty yourself out. So we see that it's much more than just hachnosas atora, just initial penetration. My love mereg hagid means that you empty your whole organ. The man empties his whole organ into the woman. So the Gemara says, "Loi merik atora." You empty the corona into the woman's body. That's called gemar bia. Okay, so Rabbi Babachana taught us that the end of the bia, when the Torah requires you a complete bia, that is hachnosas atora. Kiyasi Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi came from Israel. He learned by the same rabbi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He said, hara'ah zu hachnasas atara. Hara'ah, the initial bia, is called hachnasas atara. Not like what Rabbi Babachana said, which is gemar bia. No, the initial bia is called hachnasas atara. Amrulay, so they told him, well, Rabbi Babachana loy amahochi. Rabbi Babachana did not say this. Agree with you. He also learned by Rabbi Yochanan, and he told us that hachnasas atara is considered the end of the bia. Amalei, so Rav Dimi, who was also a big Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan, he said, ihu shakrai, either he's lying or anar shakrai, I'm lying. So we have a fantastic machlokus of what Rabbi Yochanan said of hachnasas atara. Hachnas Torah is putting the corona inside. So is that the end of the bia, or is that considered the beginning of the bia? Then there comes a third Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan. Ki also Ravin Rabbi Yochanan, when Ravin came and he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hara'a zu hachnasas atara. Hara'a is considered the entering with the atara. Again, entering with the corona. So that's called the beginning of the bia. So that's exactly what Rav Dimi said. Ad Rabba Baba Chana vade palik. He's definitely arguing with Rabba Baba Chana because Rabba Baba Chana said Hara'a is the end of the bia. The Shmuel milema palit. Would you say he's arguing on Shmuel? Because Shmuel seems to be the most severe. What did he call Hara'a? Is not even the corona entering, just the touching of the male organ with the female organ. That's considered the bia. That's called the initial bia. So would Rabba Baba Chana argue? Loi. No. What Rabba Baba Chana is saying, Minashika ba'ad hachnasas Torah Hara'a korele. From the touching of the male organs with the female organ, till the entering of the atara into the female's body, that's all considered the initial hara'a, the initial bia. Again, Ki Asur Rab Shmuel Bar Yehuda Rabbi Yochanan. Rab Shmuel Bar Yehuda came and he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, hara'a zu hachnas atara. He also agreed with that. Hara'a is bringing in the atara, is hachnasas atara. Gemar bia, what is considered the end of the bia process, gemar bia mamish. If you just release, that's called gemar bia. Remember, in most cases of arayis, all you need is hara, atchilas bia. But certain cases, like in shivcha charufa, you actually need to be chayiv. You need a complete bia. Wherever the Torah wrote shichva zera, and there the Torah wrote shichva zera. So there, what's called a gemar bia is really what we understand as the end of the bia. Then we go to the top of the page. Mikan ve'elech ein elashika. From below that, from hachnas Torah is and beyond, and below that, in other words, nishika is just nishika, touching, and that's not really called the bia. Upater and yapater. So this person, who was his name is Rab Shmuel Bar Yehuda, held that nishika is not considered a bia. Upalagad Shmuel, and he argues against Shmuel because Shmuel held that nishika, touching of the male with the female, that already is considered a bia. Okay, we're beginning again now. Nunvav Med Aleph, 2 lines from the top. We learned in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, it said that it's interesting if a yavam sleeps with a yavama for the first time, and he thinks it's his original wife. He didn't know that it's his sister-in-law. The Mishnah says it works. Yavam doesn't need kavana. All you have to do is have relations with that woman. I don't care what you're thinking about, and you acquire that lady to be your full-fledged wife. So the Gemara says, what does a Mishnah mean that you acquire that lady for your full-fledged wife? Rav says kona lakoil. You acquire that lady, that's your wife. So even if you have a mistaken marital relations with her, you think it's somebody else, you could acquire that wife. Ushmuel ama, but Shmuel says, not true. It works, but not totally. Loikona elel devarim ha'amurim b'parsha. It only works for those items that are mentioned in the parsha of Yibam. Then when a yavam acquires a yavama, he gets lierish b'nichsei aviv. He takes over inheritance of the deceased brother's property. Ulupaitra min ha'yibam, and now she doesn't have to do yibam anymore. Obviously, he did a bia with her, and therefore she needs a get. But the point over there is Shmuel will hold that it's not really a full-fledged wife. So if the yavam was a kohen, she would not eat truma. Truma, you have to make it your wife, like you had relations with her, and you know who you're having relations with, and it's your wife, then she can eat truma. But up until that, if it was a mistake in relations, yes, it works a little bit, but it doesn't work fully. That's what Shmuel holds. Rav says it would work totally. She could eat truma, even with this mistaken bia. So the Gemara examines the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Min hanasuin. If this yavama came from a previous marriage, right? She was married to her husband, and that husband was a kohen, and she died. L'divrei hakol, both Rav and Shmuel hold that as soon as she does relations, even if it's a mistaken relations with the yavam, achla, she can eat truma. Because she was always eating truma while she was married to her first husband. And so for the Yavam, even if he did a bia b'shoigig, she could continue eating truma. Ki pligi, when are they arguing? Min ha'erisin. Now, if she only was engaged, she only had kedushin from the previous husband, and then he died. Now, midday raisa, as soon as a man gives a quarter to his wife or to the woman, he acquires her even before he goes to the wedding. That's called kedushin. And technically, she could, if he's a kohen, she could start eating truma right then and there. But Chachamim said you should not give a woman who's an eris in truma until she gets married, totally married. So therefore, midrabanim, a woman who's just had erisin was not eating truma. Was not eating truma with the first husband, right? And then he died. So she never ate truma in her life because she only was engaged to the first husband. So now comes along the second, the Yavam, the brother. He does a bia b'shoigig, okay? Again, bia b'shoigig means he has relations with this woman, but he has no idea who he's having relations with. And the Gemara Mishnah says, Yekaina. So Rav says it works. Now she can eat truma. She's now married totally to the brother. The Rabbi Rachmana be a shoygig kamezid. The Torah says that by you could acquire a yavama, whether you do a shoygig bia, or whether you do, of course, with intention to do bia to this woman, of course, a regular yavama, it works. It becomes your wife. Shmuel says, Ki Rabbi Rachmana, when did the Torah say that it becomes your wife, that this Yavam takes the place of the husband? To make her stronger than the original husband? No. When she was at her original husband, who only did erisin with her, she was not eating truma. So also, if the Yavam did like a funny type of bia, it's called a bia grua. It's called an inferior type of bia. Therefore, it's not really her husband. She doesn't eat truma. But Azda Shmuel Tamei, Shmuel is aligned according to his reasoning. Shmuel, Kol Shabal Machal, if she was eating truma by her original husband, Yavam Machal, then when she does with the Yavama, with the Yavam, she would continue to eat truma. V'chol she'ein habal machal, if the husband was not feeding her truma because he only did erisin with her, so Yavam, if the Yavam only does an inferior type of bia, she would not she would not start eating truma until the Yavam does a normal bia on this lady. Says the Gemara, Meisvei. I'll ask you a question. Bas Yisrael pikachash and Yisarso l'koyin pikech. Listen to this story. You have a Jewish girl, Yisrael. She's intelligent, and she got engaged to a kohen who's pikech, also intelligent. Says the Brisa, but he didn't get to the wedding day. He became like an imbecile. So in the scharesh is like he lost his hearing and speech. So that's like an imbecile. So therefore, when he marries her, he goes to the wedding, he's not being really kind to her in the chuppah because he's an imbecile. She will not eat truma because she didn't marry him totally with a good chuppah. Mace, if this imbecile dies, and she fell to the brother who's also an imbecile, he would eat truma because even though he's an imbecile, he doesn't know what he's doing when he has bia. But once he has bia with her, it doesn't matter. He's kind to her as a wife. So ubezu, says the Brisa, yafet koyach hayavam mikoyach habal. You see, Yavam is more stronger than the husband. The husband who became an imbecile could not feed her truma, and the Yavam, even though he also is an imbecile, he could feed her truma as long as he does bia with her. So bishlam ala Rav nicha. This makes sense according to Rav. Rav holds that even if you do a bia b'shoigig, an inferior type of bia, it works, and you could feed the woman truma. El Shmuel Kashia, but Shmuel, this is difficult. Shmuel holds that if the Yavam does an inferior type of bia, so an imbecile is always doing an inferior type of bia, she should not eat truma. And this Brisa says she does. Amalach Shmuel will say that the Brisa fits into my story also. Emahachi. This is how you reread the Brisa. It means like this: she got engaged to him, and he was normal then. And then and he didn't get a chance to go to the wedding day, and he became an imbecile. So then this woman will never eat truma. But konas, let's say he did marry her, and then he became an imbecile. She can eat truma, because when he went to the wedding day, he was normal. And then the Brisa continues like what Shmuel holds. Since she began to eat truma when her husband was alive, mace, if this man dies, and she falls in front of the Yavam, who's an imbecile, she would continue to eat because she already began to eat when she was married to her first husband. Why is Yavam more stronger than the husband? When a husband is a cherish from the beginning, in other words, when he was a cherish before, if he was an imbecile before the wedding, so then she would not eat truma. If the Yavam was an imbecile from the beginning, but she was eating truma from her husband already, so that would not diminish her. When the Yavam does beer with her, achla, she would eat. So again, let's review. There's machlekes between Rav and Shmuel. Rav holds that a bia b'shoigeg, Rav holds no matter what, a bia b'shoigeg would automatically acquire the Yavama. And therefore, the Yavama can eat truma because it's his wife. Shmuel says it's limited. Only if she ate truma while she was married to the previous husband, she can continue to eat truma now. But if she did not eat truma from the previous husband, because the previous husband only did erisin, so then she would not continue. She would not start eating truma after doing a bia b'shoigeg with this new yavam. Another version of what the machloikus between Rav and Shmuel. The Ika the Amrei others say min ha erisin divrei kol la achla. From erisin, everybody holds she can never eat. If she never ate truma by the first husband, if the yavam only did a bia b'shoigeg, she would not eat truma. She never ate truma while her husband was around. When are they arguing? Minhanas suin, if she was married to the first husband and she started eating truma, then she would continue to eat truma. Rav says Rav says she does eat truma because she was eating truma from the beginning. She does not eat truma. When did the Torah allow you for a yavam to be kaina, a yavama with a bia shoigig? Again, a bia shoigig is an inferior type of bia. That's ledvar mamurim b'parsha, only for certain things like Yerusha or to pata the tzara. Aval kol mililoi, not by everything. She would not eat truma. Loi, not true. So the Gemara asks just two more questions. If the Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel that if she was eating truma by her first husband, she would automatically, no matter what, eat truma by the yavam. So according to this, how does that work? If the yavam made a bia b'shoigeg, how does that align with what Shmuel said? So the Gemara says, no, let's read it Shmuel differently. Kol bia, any type of bia, shabal machabal, that the husband would do. There are two ways to make a wedding. The wedding that we know is called the chuppah, but there's also a chuppah called bia. You can actually do bia and do away with the whole wedding, because a bia's chuppah is also called a chuppah. So if she did a normal bia, so what Shmuel meant to say is any normal bia where a husband does that to his original wife, and that is a bia that would allow the woman to eat truma, yavam, if the yavam would do such a good bia, means an intentional bia, machaba, he would be able to give his wife truma. The whole bia she'ena ba'al machaba, if it's not a good bia, in other words, it's a bia that wouldn't be kaina, it wouldn't work for chuppah, and so therefore it's like a bia shoigig. He's thinking about the other, he's not sure who he's doing bia with. So then, in that case, ein hayavam machaba, that's a truma that the yavam would not give her. The yavam would not be able to give her his wife the truma. So one more thing, meisvei, I'll ask you a question. The Brisa says, Bas Yisrael pikachash and this arsel koyim pikeach. A Bas Yisrael, smart woman, that got engaged to a kohen that's smart. And she didn't. They did not do the marriage, and he was already turned into an imbecile before the wedding. She can no longer eat truma. She can't eat truma. She can't start eating truma because she was, she never really had a proper wedding because her husband turned into an imbecile. Mace, if this imbecile dies, and she falls to Yibam, to a cherish, an imbecile of a yavam, she would start eating truma. Her husband is her new husband. The yavam is an imbecile, so his bia is not a good bia. So this is how the yavam's koyach is greater than the koyach of the husband. With it, both of them were imbeciles, yet the yavam could actually feed her truma. Now, this would not work according to the Ika the Amre if she never ate truma. If she was not, because the Ika the Amre holds that everybody holds that when she never ate truma before, she can't start eating truma unless there's a good bia. So therefore, would Rav answer this brisa to correct it? Bishlam l'Rav netaretz kedutaretz mi'ikara. Rav will answer this brisa that the brisa mean you have to put in words into the brisa, and the brisa is basically saying that if he indeed was a pikeach and married her, and went to the wedding day and married her, and then he turned into an imbecile, this is what the brisa means to say, that she could continue eating truma, although the yavam is an imbecile, because she actually got married to a normal person, and she started eating truma, albeit later her husband turned into an imbecile. That doesn't affect it. She started eating truma, even if now her husband dies and she falls to yavam, she could continue eating truma. But Elul Shmuel Kashya, according to Shmuel, this brisa is very difficult because Shmuel holds that if the yavam is an imbecile, it's like a bia shoygig. She would never be able to eat truma. So, and this brisa seems to say that she could start eating truma or continue eating truma. Kashya, this brisa is a difficulty according to this version of what Shmuel said. New Gemara. Tanarabanim, we learned in the brisa. Bas Yisrael pikachash and arsel lekoyim pikeach lihispet lekoyim sa'ach nischares einacheles. Okay, same story that the Bas Yisrael that got engaged to a smart kohen and they didn't get a chance to go to the wedding day and he turned into an imbecile. She would not eat truma. But noilid laben, if she did have a child with him, oicheles, she could start eating truma because the child is because the child is eating truma, so now she gets also the rights to eat truma. But Mesa Ben, if the child dies and the husband is still an imbecile, Rab Nasan, she can continue eating truma. Rab Chamim say that you would not continue eating truma. The child's dead, so and she's married to an imbecile, so there's no reason to give her truma. My time with Rab Nasan. Why did Rab Nasan say no? She could continue eating truma. Because since she started eating truma because she had a baby with him, so she started eating truma on behalf that she has a son that's a kohen. So even though that child died, she could continue eating truma. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye said, wait a second. Does a Bas Yisrael that's married to a kohen can eat truma infinitely? Would you say this case? Bas Yisrael shnisas a kohen, a Bas Yisrael that's married to a kohen, umisle, and the kohen, her husband died. Teichel, she could continue eating truma. Her husband died. Shekvar achel, because she ate. All in that case, kivin the mesle, since her husband died, pakale kedusha semina. That means she's not considered a wife of a kohen anymore because her husband died. Achanami, also over here, kivin the misle, since this child died. Paka kedusha mina. She doesn't have the kedusha of a kohenes because her husband is an imbecile, and she has no child that's a kohen. So Chachamim said she can't even eat truma. So what is the reason why Rab Nasan says you could eat truma? Ellis says the Gemara, an understanding of why Rab Nasan holds you could eat truma is what Rav Yosef explained. Rav Yosef Kesava Rab Nasan Nesui Cheresh Machilim Betruma. If an imbecile marries a woman, she could eat truma. Because really, as I explained before, really, when you do kedushin to a woman, so as soon as the kohen does kedushin, she could already eat truma. It's only drabanan she can't eat truma. So midrabanan, they said that according to Rav Nasan, if he turned into an imbecile later on, so then once and married her, she would continue. She would be allowed to eat truma. V'loy gazrinin, and we don't make a gezerah if nisui cheresh. If person allowed a marriage, once you do the wedding with an imbecile, she could eat truma. People will say atu kiddush cheresh. If an imbecile just gave kiddushin, she could start eating truma. People will come to say that. So Rav Nosson says you don't say that, and you say no. People won't make the mistake. By kiddushin, everybody will hold. You don't feed a woman truma, and all nesuins, even if he turned into an imbecile later on, you could eat truma. By the way, kedusha cheresh, an imbecile that gives kedusha, not even a kedusha, so it wouldn't work. Amalei abaya ihachi. So if Rabbi says that that's the reason of what Rav Nosson said that there is no gzera d'Rabbanan and therefore she can eat truma. So why does she have to have a child? Noila ben lamali. Why does she have to have a child? So the Gemara says Mishur Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold you need a child to eat truma, but any chanami, Rav Nosson holds you never need a child. She could always eat truma as long as her imbecile husband took her down the aisle, she could eat truma. So if that's the case, litlik Rav Nosson aleberesha. Why didn't Rav Nosson right away say that if as soon as they get married, Rav Nosson should say that she could eat truma? Why does they mix in the word noilud labed? So the Gemara says, Shavek lul rabban madim sayim ilseyu v'hadapolgle. He wanted to wait till the Rabbanan finished their statement and then argue on them. So the Rabbanan said, noilud laben oicheles. That's what the Rabbanan said. So that's the end of the Rabbanan. She wanted to wait till Rabbanan finished their statement. Ihachi, if that's the case, listening of Meisa ben Einocheles, Rab Nosson Einocheles. Since the Rabbanan are talking, so then the Meisa ben, the son dying, that's when you bring in, you should say, Chachamim will say Einocheles, because the Chachamim are continuing to talk. And Rab Nosson is saying, Eicheles, she could eat. So you should reverse the order. You should put the Chachamim first and Rab Nosson second. Kashia, this is difficult. Okay, so that's what we learned about. So now we learned a new Gemara. V'chein haba al achas mikol harayis. The Brayta says a very interesting thing. Our Mishnah is Amar Rav Amram. Okay, let's take a look at a teaching of Rav Sheshes. Amar Rav Amram. Hamilsa Amar Lam Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes said of teaching. We go to Amid Beis. Nunvava Mebeis. V'anaharaya la'aynim v'masnisim. And you can actually see this teaching. If you look into the Mishnah carefully, you'll be able to find the same teaching. What's the teaching of Rab Sheshes? Eishes Yisrael Shenensa. Okay, a wife of a regular Jew that got raped. Okay, so we know that she does not become usher to her husband. Why? Because only if she has an affair on purpose, then she becomes usher to her husband. But if she was just forced, it was against her will. Afal Pishu b'teres l'bala. Rav Sheshes said, even though she's permitted with her husband, if she would die, her husband, the next husband, cannot marry her. Psula l'kuhuna. She's puzzled as a kohen. She's a kohen. She's puzzled to marry a kohen. Now, why would she be puzzled to a kohen? So I want to show you a pasuk in Parshas Emor right here, where the Torah says kohen is isha zoina. Is not allowed to lo yikacho. A kohen is not allowed to marry a zoina, anybody, woman who had an affair, even though it was against her will. According to Rav Sheshes, she would be puzzled to marry a kohen, but if her husband died. The Tanatona, you can see it in our Mishnah. If the Mishnah says that if you had a rape if it was oinus, if a guy was forced to do the arayas. Right? If he was forced to do the arayas, it would still be considered to be a bia. Oy pesulas, the Mishnah says that pesulas means that the woman would become puzzled to a kohen. So the Mishnah seems to imply that just like you could be koina a yavam we just said a yavam could be koina his yavama with oinus. So the Mishnah seems to say that whoever is oinus with one of the arayas, let's say he had raped an Ashes Ish, he would passel her from Kuna. So that seems to corroborate what Rabbi Sheshes said, that even though she's mutter to her husband, she will always remain passel for a kohen. So my b'chein, what does b'chein mean? My love doesn't the Mishnah mean loishna b'shaygev, loishna b'mezit, loishna b'oinus, loishna b'ratzin? It doesn't matter how a person had relations with the arayas. Let's assume Ashes Ish. Ukutani, and our Mishnah says, Pesala, that she is not permitted to marry a kohen. So that's exactly what Rabbi Sheshes said. An Eish Yisrael that got raped, she could go back to her husband, but when her husband dies, she's not permitted to marry the Kohen. So the Gemara, that's what it seems to imply from our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Loi, that's not what you learn from our Mishnah. My Bechain, what is our Mishnah comparing Arayas to Yavama is a Ha'ara'ah, that the beginning of, just like you could be kind of Yavam with Hara'ah, an initial intercourse, so also Arayas is Asr, even a Hara'ah. So the Gemara says, Hara Daman, you tried to tell me Hara of Arayas is Asr, and you learn it from Yavama. Lememra da Arayas Yalfin Yavama, that Arayas, Hara is Asr. You learn that from Yavama, that just like Yavama, Hara is Kaina, so also Arayas would be Asr, even Hara. Adarabba, the opposite is true. Yavama Yalfina Arayas. Yavama, you learn from Arayas. The Ika Hara Ba'arayas Kzib. The Torah, when did the Torah tell you about this concept of initial hara, initial intercourse is asr? They told, the pasuk says that pasuk of hara was said by Arayas. We're just applying it by Yavama. All the Torah wrote by Yavama is Yavam Yavayaleha. It said make bia with her. But we're saying that just like by Arayas, a hara is considered a bia, so also by the Yavama, hara is considered a bia. So what are you comparing it the other way? Elamai, what does it mean? V'chein. So what does v'chein mean? Ashaloi kedarka da Arayas. V'chein. That means just like a person, interesting, we learned in the Mishnah, if you do an atypical bia, right? A backwards bia. So then by Yavama, it works. You don't have to go through the vagina. You could go the other way, and you could be kind to Yavama. So also Arayas is Asr, even if it's an atypical. So the Gemara says, what do I need to learn Arayas from Yavama? Adarabba, Ika Mishkabei Isha by Arayas Ksib. The idea of atypical relations was actually written by Arayas, because it says 2 types of sleeping with a woman is Asr. So Elamai, what does B'chein mean? What the V'chein means is teaching you that by Chayve Lavin, let's say an Almana marrying a Kohen Gadol, is Asr not only a straight bia, but an atypical bia. And that's what the Mishnah is comparing. Just like an atypical bia is Kaina by Yavama, so an atypical bia by a Chayve Lavin, not the Arayas, but let's say a Almana marrying a Kohen Gadol, that also is Asr, even if it's an atypical type of bia. But that the Mishnah is not teaching you what we wanted to teach you, that you will be pasul the kahuna. That is not true. Only maybe beratzain. Only if she had relations on purpose, she becomes asa to a kohen. But if it's by mistake, perhaps it's permitted. But that's what Rav Shesha said. Okay, so Rabbah said another thing. Rabbah, Eishes kohen shenensa. And Eishes kohen, the wife of the kohen that got raped. Of course, she can't remain with her husband. So Bala loika lemishim zayin. If the husband wants to stay with her, he has a problem, because the Torah said Isha Zaina v'chalola lo yikachu. He's not allowed to stay married to a woman that's a Zaina. If she had an affair, even if it was by a rape, he would not be permitted. So he would get malchus if he stays with her because of the Zaina pasuk. So the Gemara says, is there only one malchus? Mishum Zaina in, because of that, is that the malchus because of that? Mishum Tuma loy. But there's another lav, another pasuk that says that if a woman has relations with somebody else, lo yuchal bala rishon asher loshav l'kachta liyar sloyli ifsha achrei ashotam ma'ah. There's a pasuk that says that if a woman had relation, was matama herself with another man, and this would imply that not by a Yisrael, but if she did it on purpose, then the husband cannot stay with her. So there's another Isser over here. She would get another lav. She would get another 2 times malchus. So the Gemara says, yes. So again, a kohen that stays with his wife after she got raped, he would get 2 malchus, one because of Zaina and one because of Tuma. Masav Rav Zera asked the question, he loy nispasa asura. The Torah says that a woman drinks soita waters if the accusation was that she wasn't raped. Ha nispasa, but if she was raped, then forced against her will, muteris, she's permitted to be with her husband. The Brisa says, v'yesh lo chares, there's other types of marriages, she'afal pishin nispasa, even though she was raped, Asura. She would remain prohibited to her husband. The Ezuzu, what type of wife is that? Ashes Kayin. And the Lav Haba Meklala say essay. From this pasuk, it just says that it's an Isser essay for a Kayin to remain with his wife after she was Mizana, but after she was raped. And you're trying to tell me, no, that there is an Isser Lav over here. So that you get Malchus. And from this brisa, it seems to imply that there's an Isser essay. Amar Rabba, so Rabba explained, Hakol, Rabba said, Amar Rabba explained, Hakol hoya bechlal zoina. Everybody was in the pasuk, Aisha zoina lo yikachol. Look at this pasuk. The pasuk says, a kohen is not allowed to marry a zoina. What's called a zoina? Every woman that had relations. Any woman that had relations. So therefore, but the pasuk when the Torah says that an Eshes Yisrael that's raped is permitted for her husband, so Michlal, from here you can derive the Eshes Kohen Kedekaima Kaimo. Will the Eshes Kohen, because she's not permitted to her husband, she will always remain this Zoina type of lady that will be prohibited to her husband. So that's what the first lashon says, that a woman that was raped, for the Kohen to remain with her, he would be chayev 2 times malchus, one for Zoina and one for loyucha l'bala lashav l'kachta asher hutama. The Ikadamar other says no, you get 1 time malchus. Amar Rabba, Eishes Kohen nenso l'bala loikale mishum tuma en mishum Zoina loy. You would not be a Kohen staying with his wife would not over the Isra of Zoina. Why? Because the word Zoina means she does it on purpose. And therefore, since she did it since she was forced with it, that's not called Zoina. So she would only get 1 time malchus. Alma ba'onis loy karina be'zoina. If you do it ba'onis, a rape is not called a Zoina. One last question. Masav Rab Zera. V'hi loy nispasa asura hanispasa mutares. Torah says that the Brisa says that if she there's a mitzvah say that if she was not forced, then she remains us to her husband. If she's forced, she's permitted with her husband. But there's another type of wife, even though she was forced, she's usher. The Ezazu, what type of wife is that? It's from this price, it implies that you don't get malchus for staying with your Ashes Kohen, staying with her husband would not get a malchus. You would only get an Isser Asay. And says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, no, you do get a lav. And what the Bryce is saying is, what would be the lav? The lav would be this pasuk over here, that if your wife had mitama herself with another man, you can't take her back. But there's a heter for a Yisrael to take his wife back. Hakol hoya bechlal. Everybody cannot take back his wife if she had relations with another man. Achrei hashu tama, from that pasuk, that you're not allowed to take a woman back if she had relations with another man. But kishaparat lecha hakasav gabe eish Yisrael, that when the Torah gives you a leniency by the wife of Yisrael, the hilay nispasa asura, only if she does it on purpose, if she wasn't raped, that's when she becomes asur. Hanispasa, but if she was raped, right, if she was against her will, mutaris, then she's mutar. So the Torah gave you the exception over there. So Mechlal, from there you can derive the Ashes Kohen Kidakaima Kaima. The wife of the Kohen will always remain with that lav, and therefore she would get 1 malchus, albeit the malchus of Layucha Bala Risham Lashav Lakachta Achrei Ashutama, but not by Ashes Yisrael. Ashes Yisrael would be permitted back to her husband. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I have to